Hello there. My name is Thomas Baines and I'm a secondary science teacher at Averley Secondary College on the outskirts of Perth. Now, this video is designed to critically analyse and evaluate a teaching episode for my third assignment in my Learning and Development University course. The teaching episode that I've chosen to discuss today is a lesson that was designed and delivered within the 6th week of our last term. More specifically, it was a lesson introducing the periodic table to my Year 8 students. Now, I would strongly recommend that you have a copy of the lesson plan or the Google Slides on hand so you can get a visual representation of the pedagogical approach that we use at Averley Secondary College, and you'll also be able to get an insight into the teaching styles that are also used. Now, this video will outline and discuss social and learning theories as well as teaching practices that are implemented into the classroom in an effort to maximise student engagement and performance. This will include an exploration into the constructivist learning approach, which it will also look at differentiation and digital technologies and how they're implemented to allow levels of success for every student every day. Now, the pedagogical approach that is used throughout Averley Secondary College is that of explicit direct instruction, as taught by John R. Hollingsworth and Sylvia E. Ybarra of 2018. Now, before we can actually full on dive into that lesson content, it's important to understand what the constructivist approach is, understand what digital technologies are, and understand what differentiation is. So at first, I'm going to define them. Now, the constructivist approach is a theory that has its foundations in the social theory of constructivism. This theory focuses on learning in an active environment and a constructive process. All learners will have some form of foundational knowledge, some base knowledge that they can then build upon with new information to get a worldview and understand how the world works. This theory focuses its learning on building from this foundation to allow students to learn in a number of different scenarios, whether that's listening into a lecturer or a teacher such as myself, whether it's experimenting with chemicals and different substances within a lab, or solving real-world problems in a work environment. With technology in the modern world always advancing, it is important that a 21st century school such as Averley Secondary College is implementing digital technologies and ICT opportunities for all students, as most of the careers in the future will rely on some form of digital mastery. Averley Secondary College has taken on board a Bring Your Own Device program that strongly encourages students to bring their own Apple device, traditionally iPads, to all lessons. This theory or this practice is also boosted by the use of technologies such as Google Classroom, where we can share all lesson content for students to take a look at, access the resources and notes, and develop in the classroom, whilst also used for assessment in terms of things like Kahoot quizzes, or even just research purposes where students can jump on the internet and type in a question, research something that we're learning about, and develop their knowledge from there. Finally, we have differentiation. Differentiation is the practice of presenting similar information in a multitude of different ways and formats to maximize student engagement and with the curriculum content, and thus maximize their potential scores academically. Differentiation is where a teacher actively changes a method or style of teaching that will better suit students who are struggling to understand the content. All classes have students that will excel. We'll have students that complete the work just like that, and as a result, they will need extension opportunities. Similarly, there'll be students that really struggle and will need personal, individualized, and contextualized support so that they can meet the success criteria. So they're the three things we're going to be focusing on today. Furthermore, I'm going to talk about explicit direct instruction, which is the pedagogy that we use at Averley Secondary College, because it ties in with a lot of these approaches very well. Now, explicit direct instruction is a pedagogical approach that we use, and as the name suggests, it involves clear and direct instructions that allow students to tackle a task without too much difficulty. This aligns with the constructivist approach as it requires students to build new information on top of their previous knowledge. Now we have an introductory slide, which in this case is labeled the periodic table number 1. And underneath it, we will have a learning objective, which will show what the entire lesson will be underpinned by. Now, this will be projected on the screen as the students enter the room, and shortly after which we'll actually flip to the next slide, which is a do now activity to challenge them and get them engaged and ready to learn something new in this teaching environment. Following this, we move to a daily review, which returns students to the curriculum content that has already been covered in previous lessons, whether it's been in the past few days, past few weeks, or even past few terms. This allows students to consistently be tested in the content that they will need to be aware of in summative assessments. This section is started with a call and response. So when I say independent variable, you'll say variable that has been changed on purpose. Okay. The idea is that by vocalizing these words, the students can be able to familiarize themselves with key terminology that they should be using within their assessments. We follow this on with other activities such as complete the diagram. So we'll give them a diagram and they have to fill in the blanks. True or false questionnaires and justification questions where they need to further analyze and explain and justify the reason why they come up with the answer they did. This helps consolidate their knowledge of previous content. After our daily review, we move on to the learning intentions and success criteria page. And the learning intentions are meant to be clearly defined, so students can't confuse what they're meant to be achieving, and they should be always accessible, which means at any time during the lesson, the students should be able to look up at the board and go, oh, okay, that's what we're meant to be doing, and they can dive back into the lesson and ensure that they're keeping up with everyone else. To do this, we basically put the learning intention at the top of our PowerPoint slides. You'll be able to see that in the appendices. From here, we move on to activate prior knowledge. Now, the titles for our slides are down on the left-hand side of the slides, and this activate prior knowledge is where we reintroduce them to something that they've already seen before. Again, this ties in perfectly with the constructivist approach because this refreshes students' memories on the content that they should already be familiar with. By re-establishing this knowledge, students will have their own understanding of prerequisite content, and this forms the foundations where the rest of the lesson will be developed from. In this teaching episode, students will have been exposed to tables in different formats, and so they should be able to identify what are tables used for, and then what are some examples of tables that they've seen before in the past. From this, it forms the base knowledge of what a table is, and when we move on to concept development next, it's where we actually introduce them to this is the periodic table, this is how it's been structured, and this is what it's used for. Again, building atop the knowledge that they've already got. So to keep it simple for our kids, we like to deliver information in short, sharp sentences or smaller paragraphs. That way the students don't become overwhelmed and freaked out by things, and they can just look up the board, read it, put a few pictures up there. It's nice, attractive, and the students can feel comfortable within the environment. We also provide check for understanding questions so the teachers can readily assess and see where everyone is at throughout in the class. In this case, what we do is we get the students to answer a check for understanding question by writing down their answers on a whiteboard, and then they think about it, they write down their answers, they discuss it with a shoulder partner next to them and discuss, and if they've got a good idea and they're comfortable with their answers, then we ask them and call upon them randomly to select them to share their answers with the class. Now, by pairing and sharing initially, we bring safety into the equation, so the students feel safe and comfortable in the answers that they've come up with. And then by randomly selecting them, by drawing out pop sticks with their names on it, we are promoting accountability. So all students could have to give an answer at any given time. This way they keep on top of the work. From here, we move on to skill development, where we assess the students' abilities and understanding of the concepts we just taught by doing a bit of guided practice. before then moving into relevance. So why is this relevant? Why does this matter? Why should the kids care about what we're teaching them at the moment? We then close off this skill in skill closure by remodeling a question or an example so they have the best understanding of the concept that's just been taught. In this case, it might be how to identify different groups or different periods within the periodic table. This way they can answer the following questions of why it's been structured like that. From here, this pretty much sums up the entire lesson. We have independent practice at the last 15 minutes where students get the opportunity to express their opinions or their understandings down in their notebooks, and we can go around as a teacher and move to the different students who might not have been understanding the concepts perfectly throughout the lesson and just double check and make sure they're on the right path. Now, this is an example of differentiation because it means we are going over to these students and changing it up and teaching it to them and talking to them in a different way so they might best understand the concept. Oftentimes something I do, I know I've got students who love drawing. In fact, they're obsessed with drawing. And so writing out massive sentences is not something they're into. Instead, if I can find something relevant that they can draw, they'll be able to draw a picture, in this case, maybe of an atom, and they can draw it and it'll look really fancy and really cool, and they'll fall in love with that idea. And then once I see them getting most of the way through the drawing, I'll ask them to actually just write down a sentence or two explaining what that drawing is about. Now, what this does is it's a different way of the students sort of tricked into learning, and it's absolutely fabulous to see the way they engage, because when it comes to assessments further down the line, when they see keywords that they've seen before in the questions in our slides, they'll be able to go, well, I drew this picture, and when I drew this picture, I wrote this information, and they're able to answer the questions in just a beautiful way. So to sum up, our constructivist approach is very much in there as we build upon new or old information that they've seen in the past. Digital technologies. We use Google Classroom where all students can access the slides. The very last question in our independent practice was to select an element and then actually research how it's used in society. So again, the students can jump on their iPads and they can research, carbon is found in all living matter, or oxygen is produced through trees. They can find this information, and oftentimes I get them to create posters. They created some gorgeous posters for me after that lesson to show me their understanding of the different elements. We also use Kahoot quizzes often to sort of assess where the students are at, and it's a fun way for them to get involved in the lesson or curriculum content. Finally, the last bit we were looking at was differentiation. So the questions that we've used throughout the Check for Understanding questions, the skill development, guided practice, and independent practice are all questions that are set to be either higher order questions or questions that have simple answers but then require higher order thinking to justify or explain those answers. By making sure that we as teachers move around the classroom and ensure every student has a voice or the opportunity to share their thoughts, their opinions, and their understandings of the lessons, allows me as a teacher to maximize and optimize the output of our students and making sure they understand the concepts perfectly. Thank you.